All right, so what we're going to do, part of the interesting part about working with any group of people, any organization, any company, is basically there's part of what's called the security organization. And these are how people and processes and politics and all the rest of it play together to kind of decide on how we're going to apply information security and how we're going to design networks and how we're going to roll out new technology and all the rest of it. So it makes it kind of interesting in terms of what is a security organization. It's the roles within the company, and that's everyone from the janitor to the CEO. We all have roles that we play within a company. I may be cleaning up the trash cans, but I have access and keys to every room in the building, which means I can get into anyone's office. And if you're really, really, really smart, you're going to put your username and password on the bottom of your keyboard, right? So never trust the janitor kind of thing. But then what role does the janitor have? What happens if someone goes and gets a job as part of the janitorial service, but he's really a spy for some other company, right? We have all those blue boxes everywhere that we're supposed to put in all of our shreddable stuff. Well, you know, there's rarely ever locks on those blue trash cans, so I can just go dumpster diving inside the organization as a janitor, and no one's going to suspect anything. So we also have risks that are part of the regulatory landscape. These are risks that the federal government or the state government or even companies like Visa and MasterCard have deemed risks. So they codify them. If you want to do business in a particular area like healthcare or student services or payment or be part of a public company, you have to meet these minimum regulatory landscapes that you have to go with. Risks that are part of the business decisions. Right? Business decisions are made every day. This is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the expected profit off of each thing that we do. Risks that are part of the technology decisions that are made, and especially by you guys every day. Right? Especially if you're working help desk in Building 30, can you really know that it's really truly me over the telephone when I'm asking for a password reset? You balance that as a risk. Right? Risks that are part of the security decisions that are made by managers and employees and janitors every day. So if we take a look at it, HIPAA requires a firewall. The business decides to purchase a Cisco firewall because of an existing contract. Right? We already have a contract, we get a discount from Cisco. Then technology purchases a Cisco 7600 with a firewall module, and then security configures it to work on the network by opening ports and allowing services. So all that is one big decision process. The ones we make in the company, regulation, business, technology, and then security. Right? And it looks really simple when you're doing this. It looks really easy on paper. But paper is just one thing. These decisions can be hideously complex. Right? Decisions for technological solutions will be made by people who don't understand the technology. These are going to be made by people where a salesperson has gotten in and gotten a meeting with a CIO or CISO or even the CEO and said, you really need to use this technology because it will solve all your business problems. And it's a silver bullet. It's magic. And they're going to go, ooh, that's a good idea. And then they're going to go buy it, and they're not going to let anybody below them know until it shows up on the doorstep. I've seen that in more than one company. I've seen that a lot. Decisions for purchasing will be made by existing contracts. That contract may not be suitable for where your company's pivoted to, or for a new product line, or for a new mechanical process, or even for a new supply chain. Right? Your old supply chain software may not work, so you go buy something new, but now you're running two different supply chain software packages because your new stuff doesn't work with your old stuff. Right? And that gets to be hideously complex and very expensive after a while. Decisions might be locked in for years. If you're a Cisco shop, it is cost prohibitive to cross over to Juniper. If you are a Linux shop, it is cost prohibitive to cross over to Windows. If you're a Windows shop, it's skill-wise cost prohibitive to cross over back over to Linux. So you've got to think about those vendor lock-ins, right? So it's really hard to swap out technologies. You see this a lot right now in the cloud computing environment right now. Amazon, Rackspace, GoGrid, and Microsoft all have different cloud computing solutions for companies, and varying qualities, varying costs, but people don't want to lock into Amazon or they don't want to lock into Rackspace, so they're splitting their cloud computing across multiple environments. Wow, what a hideous thing to have to try to take care of. Some of my stuff's over here in Amazon, some of my stuff's over here in Azure, and some of my stuff's over here in Rackspace because I don't want to get locked in. But now I need people that know Azure, AWS, Rackspace. I need to know how they all connect up to my network. I need to know how to manage, maintain, patch, update, and control. And that's a horrible thing to have to do, right? Decisions will be made in isolation. Your marketing team will go, I need a web server for this product. They won't necessarily tell the security guys that they're building out a new web server for a new game. Right? When I was working at a very large software company, marketing would make decisions like this all day long. And then all of a sudden we'd find this new web server up and it was hacked because they hadn't gone through technology, they hadn't gone through IT, and they hadn't gone through security to validate everything. So there's nothing worse than being a big software company and having a hacked website. It's horrible for public relations, and you have to explain a bunch of stuff, right? Point solutions are still really popular. I have a firewall, so I'm going to make all my solutions around that firewall because that firewall is what I'm responsible for in the organizational tree. I don't care about you. I don't care about the stuff over here. I don't care about that other organization. This is what works for me, right? Technology and security need to understand the critical assets for business continuity. Now, business continuity is different than disaster preparedness or disaster recovery. If a big earthquake comes and your data center goes down, disaster preparedness states I will have and move my employees to this failover site. Business continuity puts in that process of this is my critical stuff and this is what I need to have in my failover point. So business continuity is the idea of all the systems that we work with, and then disaster recovery is taking all those systems and moving them to a different location, and that includes people, right? Every manager and executive thinks that their systems are business critical. Why else do I have them? I need them to do my job. But there's difference in terms of what criticality really is, right? If you are a secretary, Microsoft Office is critical to you to do your job. Is it critical to the organization? Is it more important that you have email before you have Microsoft Word? And that's how we have to balance out criticality, right? Businesses are extraordinarily political. They are very political critters, which means you all have to learn how to play nicely with other children and learn how to do politics, right? Don't tell the VP you can't or won't do it. That's like a really bad career move. Well, no, Mr. VP, you can't have that. Usually they just move their way around you, and then they go talk to your boss, and their boss stomps on your head, right? It will happen regardless of what IT says. You see this all the time in terms of IT is seen as a speed bump in getting the business work done. IT's got a really bad reputation for saying no to everything, but have we really gone back and seen why IT says no? Don't have skills, don't have manpower, don't have time, don't have the hardware or software to make this happen, and there's no budget to make this happen. So the manager will just go and contract out to someone else to have it done. And they're saying their internal shop is bad. But now the IT staff is on the hook for something that's out here at this external site that they may or may not know about. And that's a bad day for business continuity and for disaster recovery, because that system out there may be your payment processor, and that's a bad thing to lose and not know about. How's money coming in? Oh, I don't know. Right? Technology and security need to identify every IT solution in the company and how they interconnect to deliver services. Right? Services are web, email, whatever you need to run your company, from supply chain all the way on over to simple contracts. Right? This includes the new systems that are coming in all the time, the old stuff that we're maintaining, and then there's some really truly cool vintage stuff that you'll find on the network that no one knows about, hidden in a closet somewhere, right? And no one knows who owns them. They're basically called orphaned systems. We don't know what they do, we don't know who they connect to, and we don't know who their manager is. We don't know when they were updated. We have no clue about this box. We can't even log in because no one knows who it belongs to or what it does. All right? Orphan systems are horrible in a network because they may be mission critical. Right? Yeah, unplug it. No, you're not supposed to unplug it and see your screams. But now the other thing too, change is an ugly process in an organization. Some people don't want change to happen and will actively try to kill your project. Managers don't want to lose what political power they have. So if you're talking about turning off an old supply chain and moving over to a new supply chain managing software, well, what do you do with the old manager? What do you do with the old IT people? What do you do with the old equipment? What do you do with the old managers and maintainers? And no, simply firing them is not an answer. But they may say, oh, well, our stuff won't work with this new thing over here, so you still need to have two different supply chain softwares now, and don't bug us over here. We're fine with how we are. Right? And they will help kill off new systems and changes. You have to be really aware of that when you're doing something inside an organization. As an outsider, as a contractor, it's even worse. right? But if you're trying to propose change within an organization, but we've always done it this way, is a real popular statement, right? I mean, it's just horrifically popular. Decisions will be made on perceived power and position, right? You have an organizational chart. This is CEO, all the VPs, all the senior managers, all the directors, and all the little employees underneath that. That's called a formal organization chart. It has no relationship to who really controls the power in an organization. It looks good on paper, but how it's actually practiced inside the organization is different. And power changes constantly inside that organization. So as you're building out your network in here, think about how these dynamics are going to shift team to team, team to team. You've already made an idea of who's valuable and who's not. Now, how are you going to work with people that you deem inferior to yourself? Right? That's a tough one. That's a tough one because you have to sit on your hands or put your hands over your mouth so you don't say horrible things to them, right? But technology's sole reason for existing is to provide solutions to business problems. That's why we have technology, right? That is the way we do things. Business problems are based on the perceived power of people making the decisions about what technology you're going to buy, right? But IT needs to come up a little bit differently because they need to know what systems we need to protect. Do I protect the email server? Well, yeah. Do I protect that system in the closet that no one knows about? Right? Who uses them and how? Who uses those systems and how do they use them? Because if you don't understand why something works the way it works, it makes it really hard to figure out the risk around that system, right? What are the risks we're trying to reduce, right? If HIPAA says I need to have a firewall, then there's an identifiable, easy way of doing it, right? But if there's a risk to being able to cross-site script something in a Linux data form, what's the real risk of that? And that one's hard to quantify because we're really, really bad at looking at risk. As human beings, we're horrible at justifying risks. I think it's absolutely perfectly 100% acceptable to jump out of an airplane at 20,000 feet with a parachute. And there are other people that would go, oh my God, that's too risky. There's no way. I don't even like being 10 feet off the ground, right? What are the highest priority risks? And this is really heavily influenced by both power, actual, and perceived, right? What are the highest priority risks? Well, my systems, as my manager, these are the things that are the highest priority because these are the things that I need to maintain my power base and my employees and my budget. So don't tell me I'm not mission critical. I don't want to hear that. I want to know why you haven't put me in disaster recovery and business continuity. Because if you haven't, then I'm going to go talking to your manager, then your manager is going to come talk to you. Right? And trust me, that will happen. Right? And then the other thing that's really hard for people to grab onto is, are you doing this in the most cost-effective way? Right? The mom and pop gas station or 7-Eleven does not need military-grade VPN encryption between point A and point B because there is no point B. So if you try to sell them a VPN module, then you're kind of costing them a little bit too much money. What does a one-room library in Southern California need with a $20,000 router? But the state did it anyways because they had all this money from the feds. So they went out and bought everybody $20,000 routers. The real thing that little library needed was a cable modem connection, and that was it. Instead, they bought them like almost something like $40,000, $50,000 worth of equipment that they can't use. It's sitting in a box in a basement in this one-room library.
Yeah, but if you don't spend it.
But if you don't spend it, government ideas, yep. But this is all really heavily dependent upon how power and politics plays out in an organization, right? Now, risk. Risk is really hard. You're going to expect to see this on your midterm. Honest to God. No BS on this one. So, risk. The top formula is my formula, right? Because this is how I have learned to balance risk, right? Risk is equal to threat times vulnerabilities, plus the likelihood and the impact of that happening, plus the politics and positional power within the organization, right? In the book, all you have is risk equals threats plus vulnerabilities. If you go and you look at things like the SANS or ISC squared or any of the other bigger organizations, even IBM, will tell you it's risk, vulnerabilities, and likelihood and impact. However, there are some people that are starting to see how politics works inside the organization. So I want you guys to learn that this is the third iteration of this, and that we're taking a look at politics and power within the organization as part of risk management and identifying what a risk is. Right? So this means uncertainty. right? And that means a lot of messy answers. You can't say exactly how much it's going to cost per incident. It's messy. It's not a clean number, right? It means that risk is open to political and positional influence up and down. Well, you tell me that not having a firewall is a critical, oh my God, we're all going to die risk, but I don't think it is. So let's just change that number down to medium instead of critical. And don't believe for a minute that that doesn't happen in meetings, right? That something you see as, oh my God, we're all going to die, gets downgraded to a medium or to a low or to, don't worry about it, it's okay. Pat you on the head, right? Because that will happen when you're quantifying risk across an organization. Yes, sir?
How do you handle something like that?
You pray. Honestly, if something that is extraordinarily threatening and there's big vulnerability, like using something like Adobe, right? There's a lot of threats against Adobe PDF. There's a lot of vulnerabilities. The likelihood is every day. And the impact is that I can't do Adobe PDFs or I may lose control of all my systems. But politics dictates that we send all of our documents in PDF format, right? And that's a decision from the CEO on down. We've locked into Adobe. So, yeah, it's a messy number. You go with the risks that you have using Adobe.
And then try to mitigate it.
And then try to mitigate them as much as you can using antivirus. But then antivirus is only anywhere between 95 and 99% effective. And it is absolutely not effective against any kind of zero day. Right? So risk is the possibility of threat. How likely is something to happen? How clever are the hackers that are doing it, right? And that makes a big difference. How much you're being targeted, right? The average run of hackers are just scanning the networks looking for low-hanging fruit, right? They want the easy way in. The really people you need to worry about are people that are targeting your organization specifically and know what they want to get inside your organization. They're going to do horrible things to get into your company, and they will, right? The other thing is, how clever is your IT and your security department? Are they up to the standards where the hackers are, right? Or did they stop learning? Right? Risk is quantified or measured by how likely something is to happen to the systems. And this is prone to a lot of second guessing and a lot of lack of imagination on everyone's part. Right? If I can't imagine it happening, I can't do anything about it because I don't know it. There's no way I can know. Right? Understanding risks, this is just some vocab building for you. Vulnerability is a weakness that makes the resource susceptible to a threat. Threat, anything capable of acting against that resource. Likelihood, how probable is it to happen? And then severity is, oh my God, are we all going to die? Or no, it's okay, it's not that big a deal. Right? So we quantify these things by taking these words and defining them. Right? And you will see these definitions on a test. Likelihood. Everyone starts doing numbers, and this is from OPSIG, right? And OPSIG is one of the big risk criticality matrix organizations out there. They're basically setting the standard for all this. So critical is, oh my God, we're all going to die. High, highly motivated, sufficiently capable, right? So governments, organized crime, intelligent insider that's really knows how these things work, right? Moderate, sort of, maybe, not a big deal. Low, extremely low, I'm not going to spend money on it. Most companies will spend money on 5 and 4. They might spend money on 3. They'll ignore 2 and 1s until they raise, because we have to worry about what's cost effective and what's not within the organization, right? Severity, critical, oh my God, we lose everything, to low, not a big deal. Risk exposure, low, to critical, right? And we actually put these numbers in here. And you'll be sitting in a meeting at some day in your lifetime with a little risk matrix table and putting these numbers in here. All right, applied risk. Applied risk is an interesting one in terms of how can we handle this internally, right? When do I need to go to management to have them make a decision, right? So you want to solve problems at the lowest possible level, right? So low, it's acceptable without review by management. No one's going to worry about it. It's not that big a deal. Moderate, management needs to make the decision on whether we should or should not do something. Right? Critical, undesirable, immediate corrective action. Send it to the manager and say, oh my God, we're all going to die. Run around the hallway, waving your hands, screaming. Right? And try to get someone's attention on this. All right. Now, there's also 2 approaches to security. One of those is proactive, and the other one is reactive. Right now, the industry is really hung around the axle on reactive. We wait for something to happen. right? Because then we can go and fix it. Because we don't know what's running on our networks. We don't know how vulnerable our applications are. And we're really stuck there, right? And it's because really good information security people go into government, go into research, or go into organized crime. All right? Your average run-of-the-mill security people end up in companies doing weird things. I'm not going to say anything about education, okay? Proactive. Identify risk and vulnerabilities before hackers do. So when you're doing government work, you're actually being more proactive because you're actually going in there and tapping systems. If you were part of PRCCDC, you did a lot of proactive work over the weekend, trying to keep people out. You weren't merely reacting, but you were taking steps to secure your systems before they got in. All right. Reactive. All right. Most companies do a combination of reactive and proactive. We do patching, we do some security testing, and if we're hacked, we try to figure out how they got in and we try to figure out how to fix it. All right. Reactive has a hard time scaling to big organizations, especially when you have something called bring your own device, right? Because I can access everything from Highline through my iPhone, but is my iPhone secure? Right? I download all sorts of crazy things on this, and I downloaded this really cool Wi-Fi finder last night. That's really awesome with its own database and everything, so I now know where all the free Wi-Fi hotspots are all over the world, including Beijing. Wow, how secure is that? Because I don't even know what company wrote it. Tomka? Jeez, who are they? Right? Honestly. So bring your own device, BYOD. You'll see that a lot. Is complicates the matter of reactive because it's very hard to define where your network border is. Right? Is the border on my phone, or is the border at the web server that I'm interacting with, or is the border at the wireless place that I just found on I-5, Jimmy's Chicken Shack, free Wi-Fi? You know, where is that border? And yes, there is a place called Jimmy's Chicken Shack on I-5 that serves free wireless. Yes. Yeah. All right. Proactive. Proactive is limited, however, common by the imagination of the people doing security risk management. If you can't imagine it, it's really hard to do it. The skills of the employees who conduct the surveys and all the testing and all the rest of it. How skilled are your boys and people in the security department? Right? If they're average run-of-the-mill, the last time they saw the inside of a classroom was 5 to 6 years ago. They don't read the paper. They read a lot of Reddit, but they only read the headlines. Right? So that makes a difference. The other part is security, supportive management. It might be critical but costly and to be done in a reasonable period of time. So how do you get your manager to understand, no, this really is an issue? All right? And then the problem is that if you do your job so well, that you'll end up being security as a cost center because nothing bad ever seems to happen. So you're seen as a cost, right? Because nothing bad ever happens. Why am I spending money on this? The hackers aren't interested in us. And that's a real hard paradigm for security people, right? If you do your job too well that nothing bad ever happens, you're seen as a drag on the company and you're taking profits out of the company. So how do you balance that one, right? So proactive information security, it's written into some regulations, which I thought was interesting. Third-party network evaluations, firewalls, security systems, security enterprise management, SOX, HIPAA, FERPA, Sarbanes, all these other ones, all have some proactive security written into them. So it's kind of the letter of the law. The thing that regulation kind of helps you do is be a little bit more proactive, right? Quantifying unknowns, it's unknown. We don't know what it is. Law enforcement, governments, have no clue how many vulnerabilities are out there. Most companies have no clue what the real vulnerabilities are inside their networks. Third-party pen testing is maybe only going to find some, if at all. Right? When we was working at a different company, we decided we'd test a bunch of vendors. So we put out deliberately known vulnerable systems, and only one vendor found 2 of them out of the 10 we left out. The other vendors didn't find them at all. Right? So how good is your third-party security pen test group? What credentials do they have, and can they really find the stuff that you're looking for? Because you need to validate their skills and not just rely on what they're saying or doing. There's an amazingly cool market for zero-day vulnerabilities. Companies, criminals, law enforcement, and governments will buy these and not notify the developer of the flaws. Right? That's the real heartburn around Stuxnet, Flame, and Dooku. That whole thing is because no one told Siemens about these vulnerabilities. And yet, now, Stuxnet is in Indonesia, Malaysia, and in the United States. So it's been transmitted worldwide based on these Siemens protocols that Siemens had no clue were vulnerable. Right? So, if you're fighting your own government to keep your network safe, it makes for a really bad day. Right? If you're having arguments with law enforcement over this, it makes for a really bad day. There were some vulnerabilities in Skype, so German law enforcement was actually using those vulnerabilities to monitor Skype communications among banned groups in Germany. So all the neo-Nazis and all the rest of it, the German federal government and German local law enforcement was actually listening into their Skype conversations because of this vulnerability. It took Microsoft 5 years to fix that vulnerability because they didn't know about it. But that's a lot of really cool stuff. You can also kind of see some of that coming out of the mega download case, right? Because they were monitoring the guy's Skype contacts and Skype chats and Skype phone calls all over the place through the New Zealand equivalent to National Security Agency. And now their National Security Agency in New Zealand is actually having to go to court to explain their actions because it's illegal for New Zealand to monitor their own people. All right. So most companies cannot and do not belong in the business of zero-day research. 7-Eleven does not belong in the zero-day vulnerability research business. They just don't. All right. So we're relying on a small handful of 5 companies in the world that do this. And that's it, just 5. So how good are these 5 companies? They're very good. But their data costs a ton of money. Right? I can't afford it. So it's something to think about. Governments can, law enforcement maybe, companies some maybe, but governments can afford the cost. And this is the one thing, when we're quantifying unknowns, we always say that antivirus is supposed to be the really, really cool thing that we're going to use proactive across all of our companies. Well, depending on what kind of antivirus you use, you can see how incredibly efficient or not efficient it is. So the worst one you can buy is something called Alab, and the best one you can buy is something called Trend Micro, right? But even if I'm missing one out of 1,000 vulnerabilities, all I need is that one, kids. That's all I need. Give me a nice morphing polymorphic virus that just makes its own thing, and the signature won't see it, and I'm done. And this is out of August and November's 2012, out of 2006 test cases. How many times the company was compromised? 135 times. So this is not the antivirus you want to buy, okay? But then you add to that things like Java vulnerabilities and Silverlight vulnerabilities and Adobe vulnerabilities and Flash vulnerabilities. That browser just became the most nasty, filthy thing that's in your company. But it's also the way that we get data and information back to our employees. So where's my risk and reward on that one? Right? So I have to buy a new technology solution, deep packet inspection, HTTP and HTTPS inspection, proxy servers. How do I manage all this stuff? That means I need more employees. Well, employees are my biggest cost. All right. With that in mind, thinking about it, the hackers and the hacks get more complex. They're now multi-stage, right? Some of these hacks will actually not even bother with what kind of system you're working with. They're just going to go blast you with everything that they know about. They're not going to test and see if you're a Mac OS using Safari. They're just going to throw shit at you and see what sticks. Right? Hackers' duration on the networks are increasing. All right, so they're in there doing more stuff for a longer period of time. Right? Antivirus is not going to catch it all. So firewalls, and I don't know if you've heard this phrase yet, SEIM, Security Enterprise Information Management. So these are big boxes that take in all your logs and compare it against rules to see what's going on your network. Those are only as good as the rules that are written. Right? So they're not going to see everything, especially 0 days. Coders will never write unhackable code. Coders will always write some kind of flaw into their code, whether they mean to or don't mean to. Right? There's always a way in. There is never perfect code. Right? Systems are exposed everywhere there's a connection, and that means everywhere that a user can touch it. Right? And open markets for vulnerabilities just even complicates things. Right now there's something like 4,000 or 5,000 0 days that are for sale today that the companies have no clue about even exist. Right? Slow OEM response at times to vulnerabilities. Oracle only issues patches every quarter. Right? And those are usually what's called a mega patch. There's usually 400 or 500 issues fixed in each mega patch. And if you're running Oracle databases, you have to do something called regression testing to make sure that all the code you wrote for all the functions and everything else you do will work if this patch is thrown in. Because sometimes your operational code leverages that vulnerability accidentally. So if you patch that vulnerability, your operational code may no longer work. So now you have to make the business decision of, do I patch that one patch and have my business logic go down because it's going to be really costly for me to fix it because it belongs to SAP, right? So how do you manage that? And you guys being managers, welcome to it. It's a fun day, right? All right, so you have to manage both networks and systems. You have to manage your network systems, access points, right? User front ends and everything else that you know about. If you don't know about it, you can't manage it, right? You have to work with an often dysfunctional organization, right? You've seen dysfunction in every class that you've been into. Don't think for a second that the place you work is going to be any different, right? You have to trust OEMs to deliver a patch on time, and they don't. They just don't, right? And it's not their fault. They also have to make these business decisions, risk reward. And that's one of the reasons why they keep on trying to get people to move to a new operating system or to update their operating systems, because it becomes too costly to maintain an operating system that's 7 to 10 years old like XP, all right? You have to trust your systems based on what they are seeing. In other words, if your system sees a cross-site scripting attack, does it know about it and can it reject it, right? And then you got to keep creative with your skills. Right, honestly, the minute you stop learning, is the minute you become roadkill. Right? So kind of makes sense? So that's kind of the summary of chapter 1. It paints a really dark, gloomy, evil picture of information security. But in a lot of ways, this is also a ton of fun because there's 1.5 million challenges in this industry. It's like trying to put a man on the moon. Right? It's sort of like being there in the Apollo 13 command capsule and you just lost your oxygen supply and you have a roll of duct tape, a sock, and a piece of plastic. And how are you going to filter CO2 out of that environment so your astronauts can live? Right? Honestly, and these are the level of challenges that you have every day in this industry, and that's why it is so much fun. So the more creative you are and the more you can think of the impossible, the easier this industry is going to become to work in for you guys. Network engineering all the way on through. Kind of makes sense? Fun? Any questions at all? Wow, was that clear?
Did you record that?
No, of course I didn't record it. Why would I do that? Yes, I recorded it. All right. No questions though? Wow.
I had a question, I just don't remember it.
Had a question, I just don't remember it. Okay, well.